This is Autumn in the River, Part 3, and I'm looking to create a diffused watercolour with soft edges almost everywhere and a suggestion of distance. I'm going to re-wet this very gently and add a little more golden coloured foliage into this area. Haze of small branches and leaves, autumn leaves. So I'm being right-handed, I'm going to work from left to right, and in order to prepare this area I would have to do a bit of lifting out. So lifting out with a flat nylon brush and a piece of tissue paper or kitchen roll. There are grasses here that make this bank on the left. If I can get the brush to lift out a narrower mark, then that creates the opportunity to put these grasses in later. Something like that. Bit of mist on the water too, so a flat nylon brush, I'm just going to slide it horizontally there. See if I can lift out an effect of, well, quite a subtle effect of mist on the water in the distance. So damping an area first prior to painting into it. I've got some distant bank here that's green, but the paper's too wet, it'll be shiny like that. If I dry it a little bit, that's better for this purpose, and then a little bright green cerulean blue cadmium yellow mixture. That will be a fairly sharp edge with the water, and that fades up into this ochre colour. So I'm leaving a sharp edge along the riverbank. A little bit of golden ochre. Some redamping if that should dry. There's something a little darker there with ultramarine ochre and not much crimson. It's hard to hit the right note. There's a denser, darker bush just in there. So let that dry off a little bit. I'm going to continue this working across the image and go to this area here and damp just one little bit at a time. Excuse me. Green, bright green, cadmium yellow, cerulean blue. Let's let that spread on that wet area, yellow there, and further along and along here. Then this area of what looks like bracken or frosted foliage, quite dark, mixture of ultramarine ochre and crimson again. A little more blue in the mix perhaps as it's further away. Some pink too. Little varied batches of colour can be good for watercolour, not all the same colour. Small differences. Little bits in here. These are weeds, I suppose, bushes, shrubs. Something in there. And along this distant edge here, more of a blue colour, ultramarine, and a little ochre and crimson. Right, lift that out. There's something of a beach here along the river edge. And it's got a little pink colour in it. So a little pink. Too bright. Much too bright. Just damp it again. Let that dry. Let's come back to the area on the left. With green. Slightly more yellow-green. Just damp this a little bit. See if I can zoom into that corner. So I'd like to try and draw into these grasses with either yellow-green or blue-green mixtures. So I'm switching here between cadmium yellow and less cerulean blue, and cadmium yellow and more cerulean blue. Still trying to keep this sort of slightly blurred look. That's got a bit more cerulean blue in the mix. So this is very wet, this edge, and there's water underneath these grasses, or water behind these grasses. But in the tradition of watercolour painting, I'd have to paint the lightest part of this first and let that dry. So meanwhile, while that's drying, I'll move oil on. Got a little bit of a back run happening here, it's too wet. See if I can just put some colour back into that. Let's have a look at the darker trunks. So the trees in the middle distance, if I zoom into those, and I've mixed a dark solution of ultramarine, ochre and a little crimson. These trees are further away, so I want that, I'd like that branch effect to blur a little bit. That means moving the brush fairly quickly, not stopping with the brush, because that will most likely result in a sort of asterisk of colour that's beginning to dry out. Just try and catch that before it does dry out. So the aim with this wet into wet is to, I think, to make it more controllable, just to wet small sections at a time. Let's carry on along here, along this more distant edge of the side of the river. Wet on wet, or damp. Wet on damp would be a more accurate description. The branch should go up and diminish each time, diminish in thickness, and then spread out a little bit in that sort of Y formation. I'm really focusing on drawing and trying to do something that's, make a mark that's fairly minimal, not too heavy, not too much detail. Keep the spirit of this watercolour blurred and soft and not too sharp anywhere. So the pencil lines serve as a guide, they are helpful in that respect. Just blur that edge. Blurring edge is better done on dry, so just blur a little bit there perhaps. Look at the middle, the far distance here. These trees are much further away, so that would mean a fainter mark, less contrast. Try and stop that. These are meant to be trees away in the fog and mist, early morning autumn mist. I'm going to continue this in part 4, and I'm going to work more on the left hand side, but I need for this to dry off a little bit.